Without a shadow of a doubt, it's the drunkest show in social media history. I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone. I got my co-host, Donovan Sadiq, the Queen, Demetra K, and I am the five-star general. Say tonight, man, are the pastors pimping the political game and using the church and the church members to get it done? We gonna figure it out. Hey, say a prayer to God, and hopefully I don't bring up your church. Let's go. Hey, man, I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone, and I want to say thank you for tuning in. It's always an honor and a pleasure for y'all to tune in and take the time out to listen to us. Two very intelligent African Americans and a crazy black man. So I love when y'all tune in and we get down to it. I'm out here in Minnesota, man, and it's crazy out here, man. This thing done went from honoring George Floyd to survival of the fittest. It done went from honoring George to survival of the fittest. And it doesn't surprise me because when we lost traction, when we took our foot off their neck and we went back to normal and now things are what they were. So, you know, you see me out here, I'm trying to do my part and try to help see if we can get this thing back on track. So I'm gonna turn it over to the Queen and she gonna take us home. What's going on, girl?
So hello, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. I know that I am. No complaints. Everything is going great. And so most of you guys probably know that I guess it was the stimulus package, part of the stimulus package, the employment or unemployment insurance, a portion of that is supposed to be expiring on the 25th, unless the Congress decides to go ahead and extend it. Now, the House, you know, they're all for doing it, but the Senate, that's controlled by the Republicans, they're not so much wanting to do it. There's a whole bunch of variations of the stimulus package that's being floated around, and so I guess they have until the end of the month to do it. Also, the moratoriums on the rent situation. So a lot of people haven't been able to pay their rent due to being unemployed and a whole host of other things. So that moratorium is set to expire at the end of the month unless they renew that as well. A lot of people are saying they're not going to have a choice but to do it because it's going to cause millions of people throughout the United States to become homeless if landlords are able to enact an eviction notice, if you will. And so they're saying also that the $1,200 that was issued out, when was it, March or so, something like that, March, May, or something like that, that it clearly it wasn't enough to really help people, especially depending on where you live. It didn't even cover people's rent. And so many, especially in the House, are arguing that since it wasn't the fault of the American people that the pandemic, especially in the United States, got to where it was, help should be extended. And so if that is you out there, you are having to benefit or not being able to pay your rent, rather, just know that that moratorium is supposed to expire. I guess everything is now weighing in a balance. They don't know exactly what's going to go on unless they come to an agreement, they being the House and the Senate. So,
yeah, actually, that benefit is supposed to expire this Saturday. And even if it expires and they approve it next week, that is still going to affect the economy. And it's also going to affect people's credit. It's going to put a big bump into the financial status of the United States, which would also, we're already in a recession. A lot of people don't want to believe that. We are in a recession right now, and this would make the situation even worse. So that's where we're at right now with that. So, but it makes you wonder, if 25% of the workforce is out of work and people can't pay their bills and stuff and do all these things, what is taking the Democrats and the Republicans so long to take our money and give it back to us?
Well, as I said earlier, it's not necessarily the Democrats. that are holding it up is actually the Republicans. Mitch McConnell is one of the main senators that's leading the charge and saying, I don't think that the $600 add-on to the unemployment insurance should be there. He also doesn't think that 1,200 people should get $1,200. That he thinks that they should get less. Although there are some in the House that are arguing that not only should Americans get more of a stimulus every month to the tune of $2,000, but in some cases it should be upwards of $4,000 until 3 months after the pandemic is declared over. And we know at the rate we're going here in the United States, President Trump actually said not too long ago that this is bad. So there's no telling when this is going to be over.
You come from where I come from. If they can go to the turkey leg hut, to the club, to the trail ride, take your ass back to work. That's how I feel about it. Yeah, we can get mad at the 60,000 person march. Yeah, but some of y'all just don't know how to act. So yeah, you need to go back to work and open the economy so some of us can get back to making money. And that's how I feel about it. Whether they like it or not, I'm gonna kick it with my peoples.
So yeah, and a quick service announcement. My mom is literally driving through Houston right now. I think she's on the west side, and Jerry told her, "Keep going, don't stop.
Go real fast."
So anyway, yeah. So just to kind of end this here, I'm on the side of I don't think people should go back to work. I don't think people should go back to work. I mean, obviously, I think they should go back to work, but I think they should go back to work when it's safe to do so. It goes in line with sending your children back to school or teachers back to school. There's a lot of, I don't know if you guys have heard, but a lot of teachers are actually signing and creating their wills because they're like, if you're going to force me to go back to work, which a lot of teachers have to, they don't have the luxury of staying home financially. If you're going to force me to go back to work, I might as well lay out my will because this might be a death sentence for me. It says that 25% of teachers, give or take, are not healthy enough or elderly. And so they are actually more at risk to catching the coronavirus and suffering really major effects due to coronavirus if they're made to go back into that environment. So I guess it just remains to be seen. But let's get on to the topic, Gary.
The topic is, are the pastors pimping the political game by using the church and the church members? Now, y'all know how the game go, man. On election day, you might see some buses drive up to the polls, whole bunch of seniors and some other people, and they coming from a Mount Mess Over a Negro church with Pastor Scandalous ass Demetrius as the pastor. So the pastor convincing the people to vote for so-and-so. But the question is why? What does the pastor and the church get out of certain people getting elected to certain positions? Now, I'm going to tell y'all a story. There was this politician that went to the church. I ain't going to say the church. This is a true story. And went to talk to the church about speaking at the church one Sunday. The pastor slid a piece of paper across the table. And on the paper was every church that politician or prospective politician would have to donate money to. Hold on, man. And then and I'm gonna be honest with y'all, Demetri, you did it to one of my people. So let me get this straight. You in a poor neighborhood, you represent Democratic constituents, but you were willing to charge the Republican to go around on the church circuit to try to entice members to vote. Is this going on in every city? It's going on in Houston. I'm snitching. It's going on in Houston. So my question is, Donovan, what you think the pastor's getting out the game?
Well, one thing we know about pastors, they are not going to come into your house and pray for your sick and loved ones unless you make a donation to the benevolent fund or something of that nature. So, I mean, it's pay to play with these pastors. So, I mean, for me, I'm a Catholic. So, but I do go to a lot of churches and visit different churches because, and I hate that about the churches too. They say, if you're a visitor, stand up. Well, the church, if you believe in God and all that other stuff, you're not a visitor. You're a member. So I never stand up. That's another story. But a lot of these pastors have started using the church as a business. And as they keep putting their hands in the political pot, they are pushing more and more to be treated like a business, but they don't want to pay no taxes. And Demetra knows we have a pastor right here that started in the streets and transferred his gift of gab into the church. And he's in a poor neighborhood or, a lower type neighborhood and how long has he been working on that parking lot? 30 years now?
Roughly.
Something like that?
Roughly.
Yeah, about 30 years. And he comes up with all kinds of classic cars. He was on the preachers of, what was it, Atlanta or Detroit? LA, preachers of LA. I mean, he's got the game down, but these pastors now are not the pastors of old because everybody wants to build a super church and it's about the money. It's always going to be about the money.
I tell you, man, in Houston, I guess they trying to reincarnate Dr. King and they named him Bishop James Dixon. You seem to be in the middle of Mike Bloomberg's campaign. You all of a sudden your spot was the spot where Bloomberg was gonna come to, And the thing is every time something pop off, he in the middle of it with the politicians. I'm just questioning, dude. We already know we can't buy our way into heaven, but you got people making layaway plans up in that mother. So I don't get it with these people. You go to these churches. Why is it that you allow your pastor to influence who you should vote for? Why don't you wake up and see what these people are doing? And I agree with you. They should start paying taxes. Most of them, they play the game because they got charter schools in their churches. You in my neighborhood, you the big time black mega pastor. We fighting for public education, but you got a whole charter school in your church. You see what I'm saying? There's no oversight over charter schools, so they can rape the finances from that too. I'm just trying to see why people will not wake up and see that these Negroes at the church ain't doing nothing. Nothing. I think James Dixon ought to change his name to Dollar Bill.
So I think Creflo Dollar's got that moniker. So
anyway, let's go ahead and let's put a little bit of data behind it, shall we? So it is said that the Black church, I want to say roughly since the 80s, have collected about $420 billion to the tune of $12 to $13 billion per year. It is said that nearly 100% of that money is donated. So donated via tithes and offerings and things like that. It takes the church, I guess they spend about 60% of that money within the church with staffing and, the infrastructure of the church, if you will. And it said that less of that money is given to the poor. Per the scripture, they're supposed to share what they have with the poor, or the people in the community, but rarely, not as much as it used to, does it go to the community at all. And it is said that if the churches didn't benefit from their 501c3s, that they would be paying upwards of $20 billion a year in taxes, which could, they said, help fund the burden of the government, if you will, but they don't have to do that. And so all of that money they're being able to keep. And so we also know that the church has always been instrumental in politics, especially during the civil rights movement. The church was, really at the forefront. They were actually doing things. churches traditionally are that of social matters. So they help the poor, they get involved with the gangs and the drugs. That's how they used to. But now you start to see them moving toward the political aspect and these big mega churches. Because even I'm 49, and I remember my church used to be a really small church, and you could get a hold of the pastor when you needed to. You didn't have to go through 100 different people to talk to the pastor. Wasn't these, big mega churches, but now you have these mega churches that oftentimes get politicians come in there, because in mega churches, like somewhere like, let's say, Creflo Dollar, or what was the other guy that just died? Eddie Long. He had thousands of people in his church. So you get one politician that comes in the church, he has access to thousands of people right away. And just recently, even though James Clyburn is not a reverend per se, him and Joe Biden went to a big time church in South Carolina to be endorsed by James Clyburn. And that is said to be the most pivotal time for Joe Biden, because he was dead in the water as far as getting the nomination until James Clyburn used his influence inside of a church to talk to Black South Carolinians, if you will. So, yeah, we got a lot to talk about.
I think this whole church thing is racist. The whole game is racist. Why y'all ain't going to the white churches and do that? Is y'all over at the synagogue doing that? Why y'all got to keep coming to our church? And I get you with the big name pastors, but I'm talking about a little juju from around the corner running the church that used to be a storage container. All them Negroes is scandalous, man. All of them scandalous, all of them winning. And when they do something, God has guided me to do that. You're a damn lie. That's you. You trying to come up on us. And that's what they've been doing forever. I watch them pastors like I'm on the front row at the script club. I keeps my eye on them.
Recently, I just put up the link. Pastor Vicki Gibbs died today. She was only 57 years old. And she was the pastor activist there in Houston that actually was talking about how the COVID is affecting her community there in Houston, how it relates to Blacks and minorities. And she recently died a month later. So, number one, this is a real thing, and God moves in mysterious ways.
And them pastors move in far more mysterious ways. They are scandalous. I'm telling you, man, everything costs money in the church. Everything. You got the pastor's birthday, the first lady's birthday, all 5 of the kids' birthday. You got the church's anniversary. You got the pastor and the first lady first date anniversary. You got all this shit going on in the church, and you trying to keep your lights on. And then when you need some help, the church is nowhere to be found. Joel Osteen could have saved a bunch of people, a bunch of headaches when Harvey came through. We had to get on social media and clown this dude to get him to open that church. But soon as the big Negro march and protest come up, who on the front row with the mask on? Joel Osteen. Yeah, I'm going to call you out, big homie. I got to call you out, man. You ain't paying no taxes either. I ain't seen the black politicians on the front row for the election in his church. Why you keep coming to ours?
Well, they come to our churches because we allow them to come to our churches. But I want to take it back a minute. So the 12 to 13 billion dollars that black churches, big and small, collect every year says that they could have sent from I think the 80s till now over 1 million black students to college. They could have funded billions of dollars into black home ownership and just a whole host of other things that would have actually helped strengthen the black community, but they did not do that. Go ahead.
And when you saying about the black community, Y'all ever notice something, Donovan and Demetri? Them mother will gentrify the whole community, but they won't mess with the church.
Right. Sure.
Let me just say this real quick. Al Jackson says the TV show Greenlee is being canceled because the pastor, Dr. Dewey Smith in Atlanta, doesn't want his church to be used anymore due to the money. Now, Al, is that because he's not getting a cut of the show, or what's the premise of that?
Also, so there's a lot of money that could actually be helping the Black community, because we all know that Sister So-and-so, who has been, devout member of the church for years and years and years. And, she gives her last and her all to help the church. And that sister may be catching the bus, and, she can't go to the benevolent fund to get her light bill paid, but she's a faithful tither. And so that money is actually, that the church is getting, is supposed to be helping, because most people go to a church in their community, right? So it's supposed to be helping them. But just to take it back to slavery, because a lot of these Black pastors are getting that still from slavery, when the white pastor would run up and down in the plantation, because they said that it was supposed to be like a special thing when the white pastor would come speak to the slaves. Well, normally when they came and spoke to the slaves, they told them stuff like, obey your master, right? They would point to the scriptures in the Bible about obeying your master, take it now, you'll be washed white as snow when you get to heaven and all of that. And you think about it, in 2020, pastors are still low-key, inadvertently teaching and telling their congregation to obey your master, especially when these white politicians come into the church. Now, we know with the separation of church and state, they're not really supposed to just be out there. But a lot of times these pastors are, because they know their congregation don't really know the law the way they're supposed to. And so they tell their congregation, well, you need to go on and vote for Joe Biden or such and such and such and such. But the other part, they don't tell their congregation why they're pushing that particular candidate so hard, is because that candidate has probably given that, not probably, but they have. They've given that pastor some form of a love offering in order to go before the church and sell that candidate. So I want to go back to my original point. The pastors now, the Black pastors now, are still teaching the congregation to obey the master.
Right. Very good point. Damn, you hit that on the nail. But here's a little history with that. The reason why these churches got the 503c tax exemption is because the Democrats wanted the churches to stop telling their congregation to vote in a certain way. And, that was a way of like rewarding them and getting the church out of politics. Because back in the day, civil rights era, our parents, he would go to the church. That's where all the meetings were happening. That's where everybody kind of, groupthinked, and they did what they did. And so they brought the politicians in and they said, okay, look, we're going to give you a tax exemption. That kept the churches out. But then with all this prosperity preaching, now the pastors are saying, they're coming to these pastors saying, you know what, we need these votes. So we're going to give you money, like a Bloomberg could walk into a church with a nice small $3 million donation and do what he does, Clyburn, all these other things. So basically what I'm saying is, it's a political football that they use to either help a party or break a party. And that's how much power we have in the political system. But what I don't understand is, why is it that the pastors, the people that we elect that look just like us, don't represent us?
It's a lot going on in the church. I knew it was something strange going on in the church when they put the ATMs in there. That's when I figured out they were selling coochie at the church. I figured it out. It's something going on in the back with the baptismal pool. And why is it, especially in African American communities, You got 40 churches on one corner. You got, and I mean, they be packed. They be packed. And when the hurricane come through, you can't get a piece of rat cheese from their ass. Nothing. I'm just here for y'all tonight. I'm here to educate you.
You know, like I said, I'm a Catholic, and the Catholic Church has way too many problems for you. You know, it's already out there. We have some serious problems in the Catholic Church. But when I go to visit other churches, though, I see more women in the churches there than I see the men. And I guess me and Dimitri sometimes talk, and she says, basically, and I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, Dimitri, but something of the matter is where the pastor wants the women to see him as their man and give them the money. So, you know, Dimitri, could you kind of elaborate on that when we were talking about that?
Sure. To Donovan's point, and you guys have probably all heard, and we talked about this here before. You often hear women, especially Black women, say, "I'm married to Jesus. I'm married to the church," and that's actually scripture. The scripture tells women that if you want to give yourself completely to the church, don't get married. Because if you get married, then your husband actually supersedes the church. Your family and your household comes before the church. That is scripture. So it tells women to not do that if you want to be, you know, free to do whatever you want in the church. But a lot of times, the pastor, now, of course, he doesn't get up there and say that unless he's David Koresh or somebody like that. But he doesn't get up there and say, all you women, you know, are married to me. It's kind of a dog whistle, you know. And a lot of women, they're just not going to separate themselves from the church. And then a lot of times they see the pastor and Jesus, if you will, as strange as it may be, as their husband. But I want to go back to the point of, I think it was Gary, you made the point of why don't maybe it was Donovan, the pastors represent us. They don't represent us because we don't ask them to. You're talking about a people who won't even ask the pastor, hey, where are our tithes going? Can you give me a breakdown of where the tithes and offerings are going? Because, you know, every Sunday you get up and talking about the lights about to get cut off. And I know I make a pretty good penny at work. And if I'm giving 10% of that at least should pay some lights, right? So you have a lot of people, especially in our church, won't ask the pastor, can I see a breakdown of the monthly expenses and where the money is going? Because somehow we're afraid that if we do that, we're not trusting God, or we're not trusting the pastor, or the ground is going to open up. And so we just go blind into the church. But the scripture tells you to study the word, to show thyself approved, rightfully dividing the word of truth, which means get that information for yourself, but people won't do that. So we don't ask them to do that because we're just happy with the possibility of going to heaven. If you do everything I tell you to do right now, give all your money, sow a seed of faith. I don't care if it's your light bill money, sister so-and-so, come on and bring it to the church because God is going to bless you later. That's all that we care about. We don't care about holding the pastor accountable. Also, you know, how is it that we hear about all these churches with all these, you know, indiscretions of the pastor sleeping with the women and the children, and you'll often hear the congregation, the parishioners, defend the pastor. Why, you know, that was too old. No, not Pastor so-and-so. He ain't like that. He wouldn't. So you see what I'm saying? So we don't hold them accountable. And it was something else. Somebody made a point, but, and the church is supposed to, because to Gary's point about there being 40 churches in the neighborhood, it's because the church is supposed to be the glue to the Black community. It used to be the glue to the Black community. You used to be able to go to the church for everything. Your husband didn't come home at night. You go talk to the pastor walk down to the house with you and go talk to Mr. Brown. You know, Deacon Brown, you know, we just want to talk to you. We love you, brother. Why don't you come home at night? And, you know, all of that was going on. But the church is not really the glue anymore. It's just like you said, Donovan, it's prosperity preaching, but prosperity for who? Who has the gators?
You said a mouthful right there. Man, it's some church going on in the church. You know, I used to be a bishop. It's some church going on in the church. Because there's a whole bunch of laying hands going on in the church. They laying hands on your side piece. They laying hands on your wife, your husband. It's a lot of something going on in the church. But the thing, like I think, well, I've watched this. I've seen this in churches where they just dangle the members to make them vote for these people, man. And I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I mean, it can be a Republican or a Democrat. It just depends on who paid the most money. This is what's going on in your church. In case you don't understand. So when the pastor, we need to vote for so-and-so, that nugget done got paid. He done got his chippers, like Snoop Dogg say. He done already got his money, man. So now he finna preach a sermon and make you understand why you need to vote for Joe Biden. Do you really think that man give a damn if you vote for Joe Biden? No. But I bet you that check made a difference. Because that's how they get down, bro. That's how they get down on a daily basis, man. And then they get to sit on all these political committees and, you know, and the whole time we getting screwed. Yeah. They sleeping with everything in the church. And honestly, I didn't mean to cut y'all off. If you go to a church where on the first Sunday they shout with the juice and the crackles, you need to find a new church.
Well, you know, the other thing too, to your point, Gary, as far as the pastors coming out and telling the congregation you need to vote for so and so, a lot of pastors have just really been turned into salesmen. They're paid to go out there and sell the message that was given to them. You know, Pastor so and so, you know, if you're going out there and tell the congregation that they need to vote for us, you know, then it is something, we gonna put some in the pot today, but it's something extra for you if you actually deliver. So they go out there and they act as salesmen, but traditionally the Black church used to dabble. Well, I won't say dabble. They used to be that of Black liberation, where the churches taught Black people about being free, you know, being free from the oppressor. And so one that comes to mind is that of Dr. Reverend Jeremiah Wright. You guys have probably heard of him. He is the pastor of Trinity in Chicago, where it was the church that the Obamas were married in. They baptized their children in, and they sat in that church for about 20 years or so. And then notoriously, you guys remember when Obama was actually taking the task, when a snippet of one of Jeremiah Wright's sermons came out when he says, "God damn America." Now, obviously, there was more to that sermon, but, you know, the Republicans, Fox News and all of them ran away with it, and it caused Obama to denounce Reverend Wright. Again, he sat in that church for over 20 years. But that's what the Black church used to be. It used to be that of Black liberation, teaching Black people to be free, to actually be free thinkers, to be economically sound and all of those things. But we don't see that anymore. As you guys alluded to, or not alluded, but you said the church now is about prosperity preaching. But if you notice, most of the people in the church are broke. Now, I'm not talking about the pastors and, you know, the people who are around the pastors. We're talking about the congregation. Most of them are broke. And they are, you know, going on this belief system that if I give every dime that I have, then somehow miraculously, and I'm not saying miracles don't happen, so don't get me wrong, but somehow, some way, not only am I going to get my light bill paid because I gave my light bill money to the church, but some more money is going to come out of the sky. Instead of equipping people with, as the scriptures say, faith without the works is dead. Actually get out there and do the works. They don't nowadays really teach people how to get out there and be conducive and productive for themselves. They don't teach that if you teach a man to fish type of ideology. And again, you know, and I'm going to put this disclaimer out there. I haven't been to church in years, so I really shouldn't say with absolute what they are doing in there, because I don't know necessarily, but from what I understand.
Well, you know, so, you know, real quick, you know, I just have this thing. I said, I visit a lot of churches, and, you know, I being a Catholic, we have a different way of doing our praise. We're into the melody. We're not into the band and the big old, the jumping and stuff. We're into the melody, the kumbaya type stuff. But whenever I sit into these churches, especially the Southern church, my grandmother was Methodist. And the pastor's saying, when you get your mansion up in heaven, you get your Mercedes up in heaven. I got a question. If I'm in heaven, what do I need a mansion for? What do I need a Mercedes for? And if heaven is anything like being down here, why would I want to go? So I just want to throw that in there kind of. And by the way, for those of you guys who are looking behind me, that is the notorious Reverend Lennox Thomas from Which Way Is Up.
I can't find the comment to post it, so I'll read it from Tamika Hudson. But it ain't no difference from what people in politics do, or even what y'all are doing, speaking opinions. Baby, the church is raping you, and that's a natural fact. Let me put it a different way, because I don't want to be one-sided. I want to be transparent. And I got to say it the right way. The black church is raping you, and you ain't getting nothing out the deal. Don't tell me I'm wrong when I see these charter schools in these churches. Don't tell me I'm wrong when I see these churches not helping when things are going down. You feel what I'm saying? Some of these folks got millions of dollars in the bank, and they waiting for the food bank to come through with the free food. Can you go get some of our money out the bank and feed the community? Don't tell me I'm wrong when I see y'all on the bus, but the pastor riding in a Maserati. Don't tell me I'm wrong, man, because I know I'm right. The black churches is raping y'all, and then got y'all voting for these Democratic suckers.
Well, I also want to piggyback off of that. Let me try to find her comment again, because I want to be clear. Let's see. I think I lost it. But from what I understand, per James 3:1, I'm assuming that, what was her name again?
Tamika Hudson.
Let me see if I can find it, because I want to be clear. She says, but it ain't no different from what the people in politics do, or even what y'all are doing, speaking opinions. Well, I don't know if you go to church. I'm just going to assume you do. But James 3:1 says that pastors are actually called to a higher standard. And so just with that alone, they're not supposed to even be of this world. Don't be trying to do what the politicians or what we're doing. You guys are supposed to be separate, right? Come out from among thee and be separate, or however it goes. So the pastors are called to a higher standard, so they shouldn't even be trying to compare to those that are in the world, because whether you like it or not, politicians are of the world, right? They rarely do the bidding of the people. They usually do the bidding of themselves. And we know that the church is supposed to help people, and rarely do politicians do that. So please do not ever compare your pastor or any other pastor to people that are in the world, because that is not biblical.
If Monroe took some money from the church, you'd call me a crook. Y'all know y'all pastor's crooked, but you ain't gonna say nothing. Oh, my pastor, this, you a lie. You already know he dirty. I tell you this here. Some of these pastors getting more cootie cat than a dildo will allow. And that's coming from some of you side piece church members.
Well, I would say that is, if that is the case, I've never been privy to such information firsthand. But if that is the case, it's because a lot of people, well, in my field, I often talk about the appeal to authority, and whether people like it or not, pastors are authority figures. And so a lot of times a pastor may say something to a parishioner, if you will, one in the congregation, and they won't question it, because they feel like, well, if the pastor is saying it, it must be true. Most people don't even crack open their Bibles. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and their moms have been going to church for 50, 60 years, 50, 60, all their lives. And they can't even tell you some of the basic stuff in the Bible. So it's like, what are you doing at church every Sunday all day long? Well, we know what you're doing. You're in there having a fashion contest and all that other stuff. But the point that I'm making is pastors can get away with that kind of stuff because, you know, they got the silver tongue, the gift, the gab, and they are the appeal to authority. So they can get people to do a whole lot of stuff. You want to talk about somebody like Jim Jones, David Koresh, and a whole lot of these other pastors that's gotten people to do the most ridiculous things that a regular thinking person would not have ever done.
Well, let me say this here. Let's go down to Houston. You know, I'm gonna have to deal. Donovan. I'm gonna have to deal with the big hat gang on this one. You know the big hat gang, them old ladies that's sitting there with them big ass hats on. Y'all pastor don't do nothing wrong, huh? Let's go on over to Windsor Village. Or what day your pastor report to the federal penitentiary? What day is your pastor scheduled to report to the federal penitentiary? I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm talking about what day is he scheduled to report to the penitentiary. Oh, he took a deal. So he really was beating them people out their money for them fake bonds. But remember when I said it in the beginning when it first happened? Oh, you wrong. And many people cuss me everywhere from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. Say, man, tell him, have God on his side when he bathes. Because if you drop that soap, they gonna lay hands on you, Kirby John.
Wow. Yeah. You know, one thing I would say this, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie The Apostle with Robert Duvall. The Apostle. That is an awesome, awesome, awesome movie. You know why it's an awesome movie? Because a lot of people put their pastors on a pedestal, like they are Jesus themselves. They can do no wrong. But when you watch that movie, The Apostle, it will change your mind. And I'm not going to give it away. But the one thing that I took from that movie is that the pastor is a man too. Please watch that movie.
Well, you know, another thing I love about these hypocrite church members, you will forgive the pastor for everything that he's done in this past. Because some of these pastors have been pimps. Some of them have sold a bunch of dope. But that little boy on that corner trying to get his life right, you'll persecute him for a lifetime. But your scandalous ass pastor walk around here in them $5,000 gator shoes, pimping y'all, you'll give him a pass on anything he do. Are y'all going to have Sunday service at the federal building in Shreveport when your pastor have to report to go to that penitentiary? Because he going to the penitentiary. He ain't going to the penitentiary, Donovan. He ain't going to the penitentiary. He going to the penitentiary.
You know, and you know, we have this social media thing. That's what we do here. How many of you guys a couple of months ago, and I know Al Jackson remembers this, there was a Pastor Stevens, notorious pastor up in, I think, Dallas. What the hell's going on in Texas? All this stuff is happening in Texas.
You talking about Pastor
Wilson? Wilson, that's his name, Pastor Wilson. That brother had 50 members of his church. His internet video gets out. 3,000 women are lined up the next Sunday just to attend. Demetria, kind of school them on that video or that situation.
He talking about Pastor. I don't know if he was from Houston or not, but Pastor Wilson, the one that was notoriously on video.
Yeah, he was from up near Dallas. He's up near Dallas.
Speaking in tongues with, you know, a certain, you know, church goer or whatever the case is. Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy. But I would say this, and I want to piggyback off of what Gary said. And
Demetra, are you Catholic? Did you used to be Catholic?
Me, no.
Well, you've always been Muslim.
I'm Muslim, and then when my mom and dad divorced, she converted over to Christianity with my stepfather.
Oh, because you know where we come from with our Christianity, we would just say he was eating ass.
Yeah, it looked like he was eating a little bit more than ass, okay? But I guarantee
with a young member. With a young member.
Okay. So I shared a live today with that of Brother Larry Rivera. Brother Larry Rivera is the truth. And you guys check it out on the page if you like. But to piggyback off of what Gary said, you know, you give pastors a lot of forgiveness for a whole bunch of stuff. You name it. Just forgiveness all over the board. But as Brother Larry said today, he says Kanye, you know, he makes a statement and, you know, and I don't know for sure, but clearly Kanye is not well, right? But Kanye has been dragged the hell and back over him saying stuff about Harriet Tubman, and you can look deep into it if you like, whatever. But he's been dragged hell and back by Black people. But to Gary's point, your pastor can be in all kind of trouble, and you're gonna have the whole congregation damn near. Look at Eddie Long. Eddie Long had all these boys and, you know, grown men at the time, but when they were, you know, younger, allegedly he did a whole bunch of sexual molestation and all that to him. You know how many people defended Eddie Long? Did you guys see that particular ceremony they had with all the pastors came into church after he'd been accused, and they held him up on this royal throne and they walked him through the church, and, you know, all these pastors, white ones, Black ones, presented him with some rare scrolls from the Dead Sea, and they knighted him as some sort of a deity. And now this is after he was accused of doing all of that. But you have somebody like a Kanye West make a statement that was, you know, to some people say it's pretty asinine, and he shall never be forgiven. How does that work?
You know what, man? It's sad, but I get it. It's the slave mentality. I want to put this latest comment up. Bear with me. I want to put a comment up so that y'all can see it, because maybe she's just coming off Facebook. Can't take y'all serious. Childish talk today. No, real talk. I guarantee you, you won't go ask your pastor to see them books in that church. I bet you won't go do that. Well, I give the money to God. Well, God ain't getting it. They ain't cash apping God what he supposed to be getting. But they putting it in the machines in the casino. So if you don't want to hear the real, then bounce. But this ain't something we making up. That's why I'm telling y'all, as a people, we messed up. We don't never want to hear the truth. Well, man, these folk is sleeping with little kids in the church. We want to act like that's not going on. What's wrong with Eddie Long? What was wrong with Eddie Long? I mean, y'all wake up, smell the coffee. If you're trying to get your freak on, go to church, man. They're going to tell you who to vote for, and they're going to give you money for the script club.
I would say this, too. I want to kind of just, you know, piggyback off of her comment. You know, I want to put a disclaimer on. We're not talking about all pastors, because there are a lot of pastors that actually do the work. So we're not speaking of in absolute terms that it's all the Black churches or it's all the Black pastors. There are a lot of good Black pastors out there who are actually doing the work and who are actually accessible to the people, or the people can access them rather. And so I just wanted to say that it is not all churches. So it's very possible, Tamika, that you go to one of those churches where they're actually doing the work. So.
Exactly. You know, and that's the thing. I will never understand how you could listen to a show and take it as an absolute when it's not an absolute. It's just it's giving you information to think about. But for some reason, we take it and it's like, oh, it's a cardinal sin. Like I said something about John Lewis, did not disparage the man, did not dog the man out, didn't even go into his political record. Because if you go on his political record, he wasn't for black people. And that's based on his political record. But a lot of the baby boomers lost their shit because I dared question them about what makes John Lewis an icon. And do you know what the sad thing about that was? They're telling me he's an icon, but they can't tell me what he did. You know, we got to start thinking a different way. It's just incredible.
We don't want to. We're comfortable where we are. We are comfortable where we are. As black people, a lot of days, and it's not all black people, but because it's the majority of them, we're just comfortable where we are. We indulge in foolishness. We don't want to get our finances right. We don't want to hear nothing about religion. We can't believe the stuff that's going on in politics. But yet we know how to fix all the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, most definitely. I just think, as I say, is, you know, especially with the voters and the voting system, the same thing is true for the church. You have to be able to hold your pastors in your church accountable. They are accountable to you. Pastors are supposed to be servants. That's what Jesus was, right? I mean, if we're speaking biblically, Jesus was a servant, but nowadays we have it backwards to where the pastor is, they're being served. Now, I'm not saying you should never do anything good for your pastors. I don't know if you guys ever heard of this Instagram page called Preachers and Sneakers. Well, this guy, he's just started the page as a joke, right? And so what he did was he highlighted pastors or preachers who had on these very expensive shoes. Because I saw somebody's comment about Kirby John saying that his church makes $1 million a week. Well, this particular channel featured John Gray. Is that his name? John Gray. He was under Joel Osteen. They actually featured him, and he had on a pair of $3,000 sneakers. $3,000 sneakers and a whole bunch of other pastors. And so it just grew into all of the excessive, like, clothing that pastors would wear. Now, if I'm not mistaken, didn't John Gray, his church, go under or suffered like some severe financial distress? And he's the one that bought his wife a Lamborghini truck or something like that. And so,
how dare y'all tell me what I can buy my wife, something that I use my money, Come to find out he used the church's money.
Right, and the church went under. If I understand, the church ended up going belly up or was pretty close to it. And so it is scripture that the pastors are supposed to be taken care of, and you're supposed to do nice things for them, but it's not supposed to be to the detriment of the people in the church and the community. If your pastor, his shoes cost more than your mortgage or your rent, that is a problem, and you should take your pastor to task, or at least have the bravery to ask him, well, where's our money going? What do you mean we can't have a church picnic this year because we don't have the money? But you just drove up in here in a G-Wagon Mercedes, but we can't have a church picnic? You should ask. You don't be afraid to ask your pastor those questions. And if you're in a church where you're made to feel bad for asking those questions, then you need to find a new church.
You're definitely in the wrong church if the pastor is involved in the church finances. You're in a wrong church. The pastor should be given a salary. There should be other people outside of the pastor and his family running the church finances.
Another way you figure out you got the wrong pastor is, I liked it at the church I was at, because after church, the pastor would come out, he'd be in the foyer, wait on you, shake your hand. If you can't just shake the hand of your pastor after service, if you have, and what I mean by that, if you have limited access to your pastor, this ain't right, man. This ain't right, man. I'm just telling you how I feel. Because you should be able to get to the shepherd whenever you want to.
And I want to answer Alonzo's question. He says, my only question would be, what would you guys think their salary should be around? To me, I don't have a cap on what a pastor should get paid. I just don't think they should get paid more than the church is actually bringing in or are operating. If your church is going belly up and you're making the king's ransom, because back in the day, pastors used to live next door to the church in what they call, what was that? The church, the parsonage. I think that's what it was. They lived the next door right to the church in the parsonage. It was a nice, modest house. It wasn't this big, gigantic house in the hood, or in the hills. It was a church, a house right next to the church. Well, that served a couple of purposes. One is that if something went down and somebody needed to access the pastor, he was right there next to the church, and it was something that already went with the church's mortgage more than likely, and so the pastor could stay there for free, and the church could reasonably pay those bills. But now the pastor has moved. Most pastors don't even live in the neighborhood where the church is. They live in these big, giant houses on the hill somewhere. So I don't think that pastors should be poor, but I don't think they should be doing far better than the people who are actually providing them the salary.
Yeah, I mean, I believe a pastor should be conducive to the area in which they live in. So if, let's say, you're a regular pastor, not a mega pastor, and you live in California, you're not going to make it out here unless you're making 60 to 80,000 starting. And then you got some pastors that they work, so that needs to be taken into consideration. But if he's a full-time pastor, there's a certain salary. If he's a part-time pastor, there should be a certain salary. But when his kids are going to private school, he's driving a Range Rover and all this stuff, all based off his salary within the church. To me, that's a problem. That's just a problem. So,
how much should they get paid?
Here in California, a minimum salary of 60 to 80,000.
I think that's decent. But see, that the mega pastors, they making money hand over foot, man. And like I say, man, I mean, I get it. They do a few things in the hood, but it's not enough to compensate for what they could be doing. You know what I'm saying? And my thing is I'm watching some of these seniors have to get on Metro Lift, Ubers to church. Pastor, if you love your church membership, been there for 60 years, why don't you take time out of your morning and go pick her up? That's how I feel. I mean, I just don't feel that they're doing the right things. They guide the members the wrong way. They help and influence these political people. And I mean, they just pimping them, especially on the political side. They pimping them, because if they get you to vote for these people, then it is what it is. They get what they want out the deal. And then we stuck in the neighborhoods dealing with these folk, man.
And to Morris's point, he's talking about some of the churches, they have planes with a Creflo Dollar who squeezed another jet out of his congregation to the tune of $65 million. But you know what, Morris? I remember when I was a kid that the church buses would come around the neighborhoods and pick people up to go to church. I can't tell you the last time. Matter of fact, when I lived in Houston years ago, I saw church buses, but they used to be regular. They come and pick the kids up for Sunday school and all of that, but you don't see that anymore. What happened to the church buses?
Yeah, and see, and what people don't realize, you might buy him a $65 million plane. Now, you got to maintain that plane. You got to park that plane at the airport. It ain't like it's going in his house and in the garage. Then you got to have the maintenance guys. Then you got to have pilots like me that you got to pay on call to be ready when he's ready to go do his thing, plus my expenses of going with them. So that's an ongoing payment in regards to that plane that's coming out of the church that could have been used for the
hell. They need a plane for.
Right.
They need a plane for. Why do they need a plane?
Well, as Joel Osteen explained it years ago, because he was asked about it. I'm just telling you what he said, and I kind of get it. I get it. I get it to a small degree. I get it. He says that, especially someone of his magnitude, he is asked to travel all over the world. And so I'm just telling you what he said, but I understand it. Like, I see things both ways.
Let him get his ass on the mega bus.
Well, he's asked to travel all over the world to speak and this, that, and the other. So he said it was easier for him to be able to jump on the church's jet and be able to go. Let me finish. Be able to go here and there. And so again, I'm not one of those people that think that pastors should be poor. I don't think they should be poor. But if your church is poor, then you shouldn't because like I said, most pastors had other jobs. They had a main job and the church was like their side gig, if you will. But if the church is your main hustle and the church people are poor and the church is doing bad, there's something wrong there. There's no balance.
Right. But the bad argument with that, with Joel Osteen, I remember when he was describing that, even our elected officials do not have, unless they're mega rich on their own, have private planes. They have to jump on commercial airlines.
But somebody else is paying for those flights, though. They're not paying for
the taxpayer's paying for it, but they're not using a private aircraft, which is a lot more money. So I'm saying is when the Congressional Congress needs to go overseas, they're not jumping on a military flight unless it's like Air Force One or the Secretary of State. So if it's good enough for the taxpayer, for a congressman or a senator to get on a commercial airplane, shouldn't that be good enough for the mega pastor to get on the thing and go to Africa, wherever he's going to go?
I just think it depends on what your congregation, if your congregation is operating of that to where you can have a private jet, I don't have a problem with it. There's a problem with
all pastors need to fly on Spirit Airlines and get their asses whooped.
You know what? I don't think so. I think pastors actually, when they're functioning the way they're supposed to, I think they're actually providing a very good service, whether we go to church or not. There's a lot of people who go to church and benefit from a pastor, whether it's mental health or whatever it is, spiritual health. And so pastors actually do a good job. So I don't have a problem with them living good, but the church needs to reflect that. It can't be in balance to where the church is struggling and the pastor is not. That's not how it should work.
Well, if they want to keep doing it, let them keep doing it. Just know on the first Sunday, you ain't going to get that much crackers. You ain't going to get that much juice. So I'm just still letting you know, the money got to come from somewhere. You might bring your kid, might be baptismal Sunday. They try to get in the baptismal pool, bust their head open because they ain't got but half the water in there. So, the money got to come from somewhere, man. So do what you do.
And I think the other part that should be said is, listen, I'm not trying to defend anybody, but I'm one of those people. I like to tell the whole story. I don't like to tell one side of the story. A lot of those pastors, such as your Joel Osteen, he actually makes quite a bit of his money. He really doesn't make most of his money from what they say. Now, I don't know. I ain't seen the books. But from what they say, he actually doesn't make most of his money from the church. He makes a lot of his money from his books and his speaking gigs and a lot of the other stuff that he does. And so that is true for a lot of pastors. But then there's the other side of it. And I think a lot of pastors do make money off of the church. But, you should never have a situation with that of Joel Osteen, regardless of where he's making his money, that when the people of Houston needed the church doors to be open, he did not open the church. So regardless of where his money is coming from, that was a bad look for him. You got all that money and you worried about the decor of your church? Doesn't the Bible speak against those things? The church belongs to everybody.
Final words, Donovan.
Final words is, no matter what your faith is, Methodist, Northern Baptist, Episcopalian, African Descentra, Muslim, Southern Baptist, Western Baptist, Eastern Baptist, one God, one people. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You guys, vet your candidates, vote your interests. That's what I got.
Final words.
I would just say, as I said before, never be afraid to hold your pastors or your elected officials accountable. Never be afraid to ask them to show you the receipts, if you will. Hey, I've been a member of this church for 10 years and I tithe faithfully and I give an offering, a love offering. Do you mind if I take a look at the books and see where our money is going? Because I remember when I was in Houston, I went to a white church. It was the first and last time, wasn't my thing. But it just happened to be on the first of the year. and they showed where all of the money, so they say, right, where all of the money went last year, where your tithes, and I mean, they had a PowerPoint presentation and all of that, where they showed the people where the money was going. And so if you are not going to a church that is not afraid to, that is afraid to show you the money, you might want to rethink where you worship.
Do a pedophile check on your church. Look at the money. They 501c3s or whatever they are. And according to federal law, they have to open up their books upon demand, or at least give them 48 hours. And if they choose not to open them, it's punishable by up to a $5,000 fine every day they choose not to open. Now, I recommend that when you ask them to open them, you already got another church in mind. They gonna call security on you. They gonna get you up out of there. So it is what it is, man. And please do not allow your pastor to influence how you decide to vote. Because you remember the case that Wayne was talking about, y'all heard about it, with the Houston Housing Authority putting the low-income housing on the contaminated land, and Lance Gilliam and all them people. Well, on that housing authority is a prominent Houston pastor, African American. I'm not gonna put him out there, but he sits on that board. So to mess over our people, that particular pastor is a part of that problem. You see what I'm saying? So I leave you with this, man. Can't make me, can't shake me, you can't break me. It can't happen. It can't happen. No matter how you try, no matter what you do. You figure deal me. But y'all keep y'all eyes on them pastors. Because they something else, man. They something else. And if you ever think that you just gonna say what you want to say and mess up the church's money, you gonna find you somewhere else to worship. Say, man, another spirited discussion. I want to thank my co-host Donovan Sadiq, the Queen, Demetri K, and I am the 5-star general. So I think we all need to put a prayer list together. Reverend John, it's almost time to report to the feds, big homie. You and Jesus gonna have a calling in there, brother. Because I told you when it was happening. You going to the penitentiary. Until tomorrow night, I'll holler at y'all live from the federal penitentiary if he gets his sentence tomorrow.